What is up, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of the Panthers Nation Network. I'm joined here, of course, by co-host Shanti Stewart and very special guest Mike Kaye from the Charlotte Observer. Mike, thanks for coming on to talk with us.
Hey, thanks for having me, guys.
Absolutely. So, Mike, obviously, it's been, you could say, one of the less controversial drafts for the Carolina Panthers. You know, not looking for a number one pick overall, but definitely still looking to fill some pieces. Obviously, first question, with that number 8 pick, what is your insight right now about what they're going to do with it?
I think they'd like to go defense, but more importantly, I think they'd like to trade back. I mean, this is a draft where once you get past the first 5 or so non-QB premium players, everybody's kind of graded out the same. That's kind of been the league's kind of intel so far. I think it's interesting, once you get past the top 3, Cam Ward's going to Tennessee, right? And you probably assume that Abdul Carter and Travis Hunter, whichever way, go in that top 3, whether somebody's trading up or doing whatever. I'm under the impression Will Campbell's going to New England. After that 4th pick, bananas, right? The Jaguars could take Jalen Walker, they could take Mason Graham, they could take an offensive tackle, they could take Genty. They're the true pressure point of craziness, and I think the Panthers will be directly affected by that. Now, here's the thing. Let's say Shedeur Sanders is a surprise pick at 3 for the Giants. The Patriots pass on Abdul Carter. Well, at 5, that's the range where if you're a team like the Eagles who's picking at the bottom of the first round and you have 20 picks over the next 2 years, plus you're getting compensatory picks next year, boom, you can make a huge splash. And so the Jaguars being out of it and Abdul Carter being part of the top 5 and 2 quarterbacks being part of the top 5, that opens up a lot of possibilities for the Panthers. And so I think, everybody's like, Jalen Walker's the guy. Well, I actually think they're pretty fluid in what they're doing. I don't think you can go into the top 8 being like, yeah, that's our fella. You know what I mean? Because so many different things can happen and you don't want your plan being thrown out the window right away. I mean, that's kind of what happened last year where there was a run on wide receivers and then so they had to get froggy and jump into that first round and take their guy. So I think from that top 8 standpoint, if they stick to the top 8, I think they'll go defense just because I think Walker or Mason Graham could potentially be there. If those 2 guys are gone, and I do think the Jets will have some interest in Walker. I think the Jags will have some interest in Walker. I think the Raiders will have some interest in Walker. I think the Jaguars and the Jets could have interest in Graham. Then I think that's when you go to offense or you say trade back. But frankly, if I were them, my goal, I would put it on the whiteboard when I got into the room that morning. If I'm the Panthers, if I'm Dan Morgan, I'm saying, we want to trade back and acquire a day 2 pick, whether it's this year or next year, because a day 2 pick plus a guy at number 12 or number 13 or number 14 is better value than what we're probably going to get at 8 unless Mason Graham falls.
And with that being said, with possible trade back scenarios, are there any scenarios that have come up throughout conversations that are likely for the Carolina Panthers, as far as who they would take and what range would they fall if they were to trade back?
Well, I think there are guys they like at 8, and then I think there are guys they like plus draft picks, right? So I think that's the discussion. This is going to be a really tough draft to trade back in, mainly because once you get past those 3 or 4 blue chippers, there's not a semblance of overvalue, right? I've heard mixed reactions on Matthew Golden and Tet McMillan as far as the top wide receiver. The offensive tackle group is kind of, some guys have Calvin Banks over Armand Membu. There's, so I think what you're going to have to play into is who wants the number 2 corner, who wants the number 2 edge, who wants the number 2 potentially running back. If Genty gets the 8, do you trade back and try to get the Denver Broncos or the Miami Dolphins or the Dallas Cowboys to trade up? You're going to have to find a sucker, for a lack of better terms. And that's the thing. And you're also going to have to be creative, right? The Panthers don't pick between 9 and 56. That's a huge gap. And so if I'm them, I'm looking at this I want to bridge the gap. And so if I trade back to 13 with the Dolphins, let's swap second round picks. So now I'm picking 13th and 48th. and then let's add a third round pick this year and change. Like, that to me is logical. It wouldn't shock me if they traded back and took a loss on the trade chart just because adding value to a similarly rated prospect is good business. And when we talk about suckers, we talk about Dallas and we talk about Miami. Those are two teams that are relatively desperate. They also, Dallas didn't spend a ton of money this year and they want to develop guys. Well, they want stars. So Ted McMillan, Genty, the Texas corner whose name is escaping me. Maybe those are the guys that they go after. With the Dolphins, I could see them going after Genty. He's perfect for that system. He'll run for like 1,500 yards his rookie year. And they've had success with like Jay Ajayi, for instance. I mean, obviously that was a while back, but Chris Greer is the guy that gave a massive contract to Jordan Howard when he was basically hanging on by a thread. They'll pay running backs. They'll prioritize running backs. I also think they could use a corner. They're going to lose Jalen Ramsey probably to a trade. And then I think offensive tackle, they just lost Tyron Smith. So it's like, or not Tyron Smith, Teron Armstead. So like there's a lot going on there. I mean, so that's what I would say to you is like, keep a focus on that. Like, I mean, look, even Chicago and San Francisco could have interest, especially in a short trade back. If I tell you, if I'm the Panthers and I go, yo, you want to still pick in the second round and trade up? Let's talk. Like, that to me is a selling point. Cool, you're going to get a third round pick, but if you're still breaking even as far as your pick numbers for the most part, or still being able to touch every single round, I think that's appealing.
Yeah, I think Dan's shown that, especially in years past, that necessity to be in every single round. I mean, we saw it in the second round last year, trading back and then trading up and then trading back again. He's been very active when it comes like that. And you talked about it, that gap between 9 and 57, and then even the gap between 74 and 111 is pretty prominent. So I was wondering how much will they be itching to try to fill those gaps in some way, shape, or form?
Yeah, I think you just have to be creative, and I think that's how Brant Tillis helps. I think that's how Eric Eager helps. I think these guys are really smart and diligent, and I think like let Dan focus on the scouting and the value, and let these other guys kind of assist in obtaining that value. And I think, like, if you ask me, like, excuse me, once you get past when you're picking in this top 8, it's kind of like I don't want to call it a value wasteland, but it's like kind of like you're all. Have you ever been to one of those restaurants where they have like that sliding like menu of stuff? Like, it's like everybody's going for that. There's no like you're not ordering something special a la carte. You know what I mean? Like, that's kind of what it is. And so I think, like, from their perspective, if you can add a third round pick, if you can get a pick for 2026, I mean, you're already picking 9 times. How many times do you have to pick? Like, that's the thing. Like, I think if you can have some clever accounting, so to speak, like, that's the way to go. And I think smart teams make mature decisions. They don't just get stuck. Now, if they are stuck, quote unquote, to quote Dan Morgan, I think they go for the best player on their board, which will most likely be defense. And so, look, I'm with you. Like, I understand the fan base is clamoring for a wide receiver. I get it. This team allowed more than 31 points last year. In order to survive in the NFL, you need to probably take about 8 to 10 points off that average per game. Because it doesn't matter how good Bryce Young is. It doesn't matter how good a wide receiver is if you're trying to match point for point every week with like 27 to 31 points. It's just like you're not going to win, week in and week out like that. Cool. If you want to go 7 and 10, if that's your goal, hey, it's a market improvement, then yeah, go take a wide receiver. I just don't know that there's that guy. And I think something that people are not focusing on is this is the slowest offense I've ever covered. I mean, this is easily the slowest offense I've ever covered. And I've been covering the league for 11 years as a beat writer, and longer as just a writer in general. And I think, like, this team badly needs speed. And Matthew Golden, to me, if you were to take a wide receiver, is the guy who says, okay, defense, now you're going to have to cover me not only with a corner, you're going to have to cover me with a safety. If I'm a defensive coordinator and I see Ted McMillan out there, cool, that guy's going to win a bunch of jump balls, but the second he catches the ball, he is down. And so I don't have to worry about breakaway speed. I'm just going to stack the box, all right? I know these guys want to run the ball. But if I'm Matthew Golden and I know how to set up my stems and my routes and I'm a yards after catch guy, if I can run a post and take it to the house at any point, if I can run a slant, if I can break inside and I know that safeties are in front of me, like that's like the thing to me. And I think that's very limited in this class. Like another guy I like probably on day 2 is Kyle Williams, who averaged 17 yards per catch off of 70 catches. Like it's a fluke if it's off of 30 catches, but 70 catches, that dude can steamroll. And he played on the outside. And he'd be an excellent compliment to Xavier Legette. Like I understand the Ted McMillan appeal. I think he is a very, very good prospect, but you also have to think about the environment that you're in. And he's going to compare to Drake London and Mike Evans. I don't see that at all. I've seen him compared to Devontae Parker. I see that. Yeah, that's fine. I mean, he was a 1,000-yard receiver at one point. Like, I get it. He's a good player, but like everybody's like, well, like I got a tweet today. They need their AJ Brown. There is one AJ Brown, and there are 4 guys on that tier. It's like him, Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase, and Mike Evans. Like to me,
that's it.
You know, big-bodied guys who can just make every play, and so it's just like this team is 5-12, or was 5-12. They had the worst scoring defense ever. They had the worst rushing defense since 1980. Like, guy. Like, what are we talking about here?
This fan base, to me, it gets so on its head when it comes to wanting that success from certain players immediately, which is so funny to me because that's never been the mantra of this team. You get it, how you can over time, you build it up. And so, you have them with very short memories and very short attention spans. And so that's the whole thing. Like you talk about X on the other side, that's your big body guy. If you get him the development, obviously there's the questions about his hands and the injury. But I always, when you talk about Ted, I'm like, okay, well, you're putting these two, you don't see very many teams that work where you have the exact same wide receiver out on both sides, 2 big body guys, 2 jump ball guys. You don't see that happen very often. You need that antithesis of your speedy guy and your big body guy. And so for me, when you have that right, this historically bad defense, I don't want to really see an offensive player picked outside of before the 3rd round, in my opinion. I'm going linebacker, edge rusher, defensive tackle in no particular order, because I just think that with Shaq gone, with Derek Brown having another big injury, there's questions about how many players, Mike, did we put out on the defensive front last year, if you can even quantify it?
Enough. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I think, look, and I think they're happy with what they did in free agency. But I also think, like, I don't see that as an objective just observer. I don't see it as being enough. I don't think they're done. I think they should add to that defensive front. I think they should, I want to get S squared back in here. What you got?
I just wanted to ask, with the amount of pre-draft visits they had, you take a look at that list. There's a lot of defensive linemen, a lot of edge rushers, a lot of interior guys. How telling is that to what they're actually trying to do when come draft day, when it's time to put those picks in? Are we all pretty much thinking the same thing, that they will be attacking that defensive line still, even with the signings they made in the offseason?
Yeah, I think so. 30 visits get kind of convoluted in this way where it's like everybody assumes that it's just like those are the 30 guys they're going to pick from. I know that's not what you're implying, but from the general public, I'd be kind of wary of that, just because some teams bring guys in if they have questions about their medical or about their personalities, whatever. They've got to figure them out. Yeah, they like them on tape, but who knows? And let's say 10 of those guys strike out, right? There's no way you're going to draft 9 of those 20 players because other teams are going to take them, right? So, but I would say they have an interest in adding to that defensive line. I think if Mason Graham fell to 8, turning the pick, you're good.
Yeah.
I think with Jalen Walker, it's a really interesting and honest discussion that needs to be. I think the thing that I come away with in this draft class is not that these guys aren't great prospects. Beyond the general glaze of what this team is, like from a national perspective, I think you have to look at like the context clues of how this place operates. And I think if you take the wrong guy who is a great prospect, you have a very good chance of messing him up. I'm more old school in the fact that like I believe in production meeting testing. My favorite player in this class, just I'll put it out there, is Donovan Ezeraku from Boston College.
Mm-hmm.
Had 16 and a half sacks last year, had 13 and a half sacks his first 3 years. So do the math, that's 30. He ran an unreal 6.943 cone. And for those that don't follow the combine or whatever, the 40-yard dash is not important for anybody who's not a wide receiver or a quarterback or really a safety. But the 3 cone is a very good indicator of pass rush proficiency and the ability to bend. And boys, if you run sub 7'1", you're in elite category.
Mm-hmm.
And he's got long arms, 34-inch arms. Like, he reminds me of Cliff Averill, who was in Seattle with Dan Morgan and Dave Canales.
Mm-hmm.
I understand that he hasn't been in the discussion of being like a top 15 pick. Well, you know, this is a kid show, I'm sure, but bull hockey, okay? Because let me tell you something. That production, meeting those testing numbers, I mean, he can just go. He's got speed. He's got power. He's only 21. Everybody likes to talk about Mike Kaye being 20 and Shamar Stewart being 20. Cool. Well, he's 21 and he produced more in two of his college seasons more than Shamar Stewart did in 3 years combined. And Mike Kaye. So like, let's like look at this and say, cool, maybe he's a safer pick because we know he can produce. At worst, he's a really good pass rusher. If he's not great against the run, whatever, then you use it that way. With Jalen Walker, the thing that I think people need to talk about is in 3 years of being a defensive coordinator and here and in Denver, Ejiro Evero has never been anxious to play rookies. You know, they drafted Nick Bonito in the second round. He didn't play major snaps until after the first month of the season. He ended up playing like 35% of the defensive snaps his rookie year. They had another nickel corner who his name escapes me. He played a lot, but there were injuries. Mm-hmm. Then DJ Johnson, a guy that Evero wanted, didn't play until there was a rash of injuries at edge to the point where Rico Leota was getting major snaps over him, by the way. Mm-hmm. And then last year, they draft Shaw Smith-Wade. He gets one spot to fill in an injury relief, and then Troy Hill ages out, and Dane Jackson's horrible against the Chiefs, and then he finally gets to play again. You know, Trevin Wallace didn't play until Shaq suffered a second season-ending injury in the first month of the season. Mm-hmm. Jalen Walker, you're going to have to build your defense around him. He is a top 10 pick. You're billing him as a hybrid. Yes, you see him as an outside linebacker, but he is not very long or very tall, and you've preached length your entire time here. Plus, you know, you've got this rotation of DJ Wadham, who's not a very good run defender, decent pass rusher. Patrick Jones is a good run defender. I think his sack numbers are a little bit manufactured from that last season. And then you've got Jadeveon Clowney, who should not play anywhere near as many snaps as he did last year. So, like, you're going to go with a guy who, you know, if the defense is terrible, Everett's probably not back next year. You're also asking him to change around his scheme a little bit, or his planning, or his mindset after his unit gave up the most rushing yards since 1980. Like, I think there's so much context that's missed. Now, I'm not saying Jalen Walker won't be the guy. They like Jalen Walker. I just think, like, good teams make mature decisions, and I don't know that he is the best fit here.
And to that point, I think it was, I can't remember when it was, may have been a few weeks ago, when Dan and Canals were both asked about the draft, they alluded to that. Hey, we got a guy that's a better run stopper. We got a guy that may be a decent pass rusher. We kind of have the flexibility to be able to go get a guy that may just be a pass rusher. So to your point, with the kid from Boston College, I mean, I'd be all for it because like you said, I mean, 16 and a half sacks is still 16 sacks. I can't dismiss that because of the conference, because of the school, and because I mean with that, like it is why hasn't he been talked about as far as being a possible top 10 pick and especially in a draft that's that's expected to be defense heavy? Why hasn't his name been swirled around with some of the elite guys?
Well, because I think he's probably only a 3-4 edge.
Mm.
I don't think he's a 4-3 guy. He weighs 248 pounds. Like, he is a speed off the edge guy. Like, he's been compared to Yannick Ngakoue, who I covered in Jacksonville. Pure speed. The issue you worry about is maybe he doesn't develop into a run defender, but he's 21. He's got long arms. And that's all I need, really.
Yeah.
He benched well, too. Like, he's got strength, and you can add to that frame. Like, I'm guaranteeing you by year 3, he's playing at 265. I mean, like, if they want him to. And the thing is like, let's say the defense is kind of middling and they move on from Evero. Like, he can play 4-3, and I think it's just a matter of you'd want him to be at that 265, 270 range. He's largely been a stand-up guy, but in Evero's system, you basically use 2 4-3 ends that stand. He's going to win from a 2-point stance. And you can do that in a 4-3. Like, there are hybrid systems. You can play a 4-3 under. You can play a 4-3 over. Like, there are ways to manufacture that edge rush. And I think my priority, if I'm the Panthers, is adding speed to this offense and this defense, because speed kills, and you have to match speed for speed. I'd also say a lot of guys are winning against offensive tackles who are more athletic nowadays by speed and not necessarily power. Power is important, but you just signed Bobby Brown and Deshaun Warden to bring that power, right? You want that speed. You want that. You want to be able to say, hey, look, we're going to line up with Derek Brown in front of this edge rusher, and Derek Brown's going to take on a double team, and this edge rusher is going to speed past this tight end like the Roadrunner. You know what I mean? So I think like that's the perspective that you need to take. Now, maybe that is Jalen Walker. Maybe the issue, if you're taking Jalen Walker there and you view him as an outside linebacker, he's got to be your edge too. And that's a projection to me. Like, that is, again, I think he is a really, 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 really good prospect. The problem with really, 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 really good prospects is if they're put in terrible situations. We've seen it with Hassan Reddick. Like, you could waste years off your career. And again, you know, for the kid's sake and for the Panthers' sake, they better be right if he's the guy. Because, and I don't think the Panthers would take him if they thought there was a chance of him failing there. They'd have to have this belief that he was that guy. I just think the projection, along with the defensive coordinator fit, is kind of confusing. And maybe they've made changes behind the scenes. Maybe they've said, let's change up the scheme. Maybe that's why it makes sense. But to me, like, just everything that I've seen, the pick isn't a slam dunk with Jalen Walker. And I don't know that the Panthers view any of the guys in the top 10 or that they think might be available as a slam dunk. So, like, again, trading out would be advantageous.
I mean, absolutely. You've seen the mirror of it. If you look back a few years ago, you know, an edge rusher we took in the top 10, you know, the system and the defensive scheme and the team wasn't where it was supposed to be. And we saw how that fleshed out. And now that edge rusher is playing for New York and didn't really get to see his full peak prime, you know, ever in Carolina with a guy that he could partner with on that defensive line that was ever healthy at the same time. So there's definitely room for kind of concern when you don't have that system set up. We've talked about that with other prospects as well. Last one before we let you go. They were very active, obviously, with, you know, re-signing guys in the defensive back position and looking for guys at the safety position. Didn't really fall the way they wanted to in the draft. You got to figure they're still going to be looking for safeties and corners.
Yeah, absolutely. I think this is actually a really good draft for safeties. In talking to people that I trust, I'll have a mock draft out later this week where I have them going back to back in the 4th round on safeties who I actually think can play right away. And the way they've talked about using Trevon Moehrig, if he plays nickel if he plays big nickel or he plays dime linebacker, you need two safeties back there who you trust and can cover. They'll give Damani Richardson a shot. They'll let Nick Scott kind of try to earn a job. I just think, like, you know, Julian Blackman's still out there as far as I know. That's going to, if that happens, that'll be post draft. And he would be a perfect fit, but you still have to go after guys that can cover the post. And two guys to watch out for: Virginia safety Jonas Sanker, Oklahoma safety Billy Bowman. Those would be two guys on day 3, at the top of day 3, where you could really take advantage of having those 5 picks between the 4th round and the 5th round. If you're looking earlier, Xavier Watts from Notre Dame is phenomenal as a 2nd round option if you move up. I think if they traded back into the 20s, Nick Imware from South Carolina would be in play. Starks from Georgia. I don't think they view safety the way that everybody else does. Like, safety is not a premium position in the league. I don't think they would be adverse to taking a safety late in the 1st round. So I think, like, but again, remember, this is a really good class. So
fair enough.
You could also see a college nickel guy turn to playing free safety. But the problem is, safety was a very large reason why they sucked against the run last year. That is a fact. And they went out and they got Morin, who's a sound tackler. But if you're drafting a guy, he cannot be some flimsy just post safety. Like, he has to be able to tackle, he has to be able to run, he has to be able to show grit. Like, I think Bowman and Sanker are two guys that are playmakers, but they also aren't afraid of contact. And I think, like, that is appealing in its way. And I think that's a fit.
Interesting. Awesome. Well, Mike, thank you so much. We're looking for that mock draft to come out here in a few days, of course, with just a little bit left before the draft. And for listeners, obviously, if you don't know that the Charlotte Observer and Mike Kaye and Alex Zetlow have some of the best Panthers coverage out there, I'm not sure what you're doing. If you're outside of the city area, then I guess you could understand. But even past that, throw in Scott Fowler, Shane Connick, you got some of the best sports coverage that you're going to find this side of the Mason-Dixon line. So, Mike, again, thank you so much for coming on and talk to us. And I know I'll be seeing you at Bank of America Stadium on draft day, and hopefully, we have some exciting things to talk about.
Thanks for having me, guys.